Christ is ascended.
From earth to heaven.
God bless you. Please have a seat. I don't know if you heard, but this year, the United States is celebrating 250 years since the Declaration of Independence in 1776. But that independence wouldn't have lasted very long without the wonderful example set by our first president, George Washington, who kind of as the first example of this in the history of the world willingly gave up power, right? They weren't really sure if it was going to work. He could have just said, you know what, I like this. I think I'm going to stay. And it might have happened that way. And it happens that way all over the world many times, right? But George Washington set the bar high by saying, you know what, I will let go. I will go off to Mount Vernon and retire into my quiet agrarian life, whatever. And so he's to be commended for that. Without that choice, the United States probably wouldn't have lasted very long. All that is just a preface then to say how wonderful and great is the figure that we celebrate today of St. Constantine, equal to the apostles. St. Constantine is slandered all the time by revisionist historians who want to say he paganized Christianity and all that. Brothers and sisters, it's the opposite. Think about what Constantine gave up. George Washington gave up a few more years in the White House or whatever it was at the time. I don't know if they had the White House yet. I don't think yet. Not until John Adams. Constantine gave up godhood. He was literally considered as a Roman emperor a god. And the people, by law, had to offer sacrifice to him as a god in his name. This is what all of those kind of martyrdoms in the early centuries of Christianity were about, because they weren't being forced to go to the temple of Zeus or Athena or whatever. It was that one time a year where they said, okay, it's time to prove you're a loyal Roman, offer sacrifice for the emperor. And they'd say, I can't even do that. Constantine is the first Roman emperor, the first emperor of any civilization that I know of, that willingly gave up that role of divine God King and chose just to be a man who serves the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the God of Gods. He gave up not only that position in the eyes of the people, but the ritual role of, what is the term? Pontificus Rex or Pontificus Maximus. You know, this term pontiff that the Pope uses actually was originally the term that the Roman emperor held, because he was the high priest of Roman religion. He was the highest religious authority in the Roman Empire. Constantine gives that up, says, I'm not going to serve the pagan gods that way. I'm not going to be their priest anymore, and I'm not going to receive sacrifice or demand sacrifice. I'm going to let people do what they want. He never made paganism illegal, but he said, I'm also going to let Christianity be legal. That was his first step, which, if that was all he had done as an emperor, would have put him in the great halls of history for legalizing Christianity, stopping the persecutions. But by becoming a Christian and accepting that role, he transformed forever human civilization, not just Roman civilization, but really human civilization. You could make the argument that the Georgians kind of did it ahead of him, and that would be fair. But this was a much bigger game, right? A global, if you will, at the time, multi-continent endeavor that he was engaged in. And all of this is to change the image of what a king is as well, not just not being a priest, but now being the emperor was different, because now it was not modeled on the image of Jupiter or Zeus, as you may know him in the Greek mythology, Jupiter in the Roman mythology, or any of the other ancient king gods of pagan mythology, but rather the kingship of the Roman Empire as a Christian imperial house was now more after the image of somebody like David and Solomon, a king in the house of God, one serving the Lord. And that moves that civilization towards a more biblical concept of rulership. Today, this feast of St. Constantine, by the grace of God and good providence, falls also on the feast of the Ascension. Doesn't normally happen that way, right? Because Ascension moves all over the place, just like it follows 40 days after Pascha. So, once in a blue moon, do we get Pascha or Ascension and Constantine on the same day? But Ascension actually sets the paradigm for Constantine, because what is the Ascension? The Ascension is not simply, no, Jesus left. That was made us sad. He rose from the dead, he hung around for a while, and then he took off. That's not what Ascension is. Ascension is the enthronement of Christ at the right hand of God the Father. It is the feast of the coronation, if you will, of the Son of God to rule in the midst of his enemies, to take the church, to take humankind into the heavenly realm, into the court of God himself, and sit down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. So what Constantine does is it becomes an image of Christ's kingly rulership in the world. If you see an icon, do we have an icon of Constantine up there? We have, where is he? Is he up there? Where is he? He's up there, I think. I don't know. There's some kings up there. I don't know if we have him. He's back there, maybe in the, no, he's not even in the Holy Cross icon. Is he up there? He's there. He's wearing his crown and he's being a king. But the kings, what you understand, actually, by the way, when you see the bishops with the mitres, they only got those much later, after the emperor had left, because they were originally, the crowning looking things was to image the emperor. And so the bishops, after the fall of Constantinople, start to wear the big funny hats that they wear, because they are given the role as ethnarchs over the people under Turcocratia. But they didn't always wear those hats. That hat is modeled after the Byzantine emperor. So if you look in old ancient images of Byzantine kings, you might see that kind of hat. Anyway, it's all pointing not towards earthly power, but to heavenly power, to the kingdom of God. And it's trying to image it into the world. So everything the Byzantine emperors did that were holy, there were many that weren't. There were many that were heretics, and there were many that were corrupt, and many that were wicked, because we live in the world and it's fallen. But those emperors, the very few of them that were really good and holy, were truly trying intentionally to image the reign of Christ over the earth through their actions and through their life. And so it's not a theocracy in some kind of lame, very superficial sense. It's a much different idea. It's an, I don't know how you'd call it. It's an imaging, an iconoclasy, maybe. In a revelation of the rule of God on earth through these figures, through these people. Just as the priest images, or the bishop images, Christ in the divine liturgy as the high priest of our salvation. So the emperor had this almost a liturgical role, not as a priest, but in this kingly role. And he did have kind of some liturgical functions which were unique to the emperor. Not really blessing per se, but things that were kind of the role of the emperor to do. Anyway, thought you might find that interesting. We live in a time in which, of course, worldly powers are many people vying for power, earthly power, and that's going to happen until the end of the age, until Christ comes again. We need to realize who is our true authority in life. Our true authority in life is Christ, and all rulers must be subject to him, subject to truth, justice, and righteousness. And if we don't expect that from our rulers, not that maybe in the reality is we don't expect it much, but we should expect it from our rulers. We should call for it. We should cry out for it. We should pray for it. And we should only encourage those people who will act in that way to take up roles of leadership, no matter how small or how big. And maybe we'll get on the right track. God help us. Christ is among us.